Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for this opportunity. So this is about SRI as an agroecological method, because we have already, most of us here would be knowing natural farming, but before that SRI also in India was being promoted as a agroecological practice. So basically it focuses on the how the management of the plant, soil, water and nutrients, rather than it's not input driven. It's not working with fertilizers, pesticides or insecticides, and that's why it's more skill oriented, or even some people would say it's more labor intensive. So that's a big question mark over there. And as you can see, so it's based on 4 principles. One is, to reduce the competition for light and nutrients and water between the plants in a plot. Second is ensuring healthy root growth. Third is not letting, allowing the root to grow as much as they can. So reducing the saturation of water in the soil. And third is enhancement of the soil microbial activity. So based on these are principles which will apply for any of the if you are talking about basic farming. But these then get converted into practices which you see in the boxes outside. And this was developed in Madagascar by a French priest, Henry Lalveny. And this was developed on farms, not something which was developed in a research farm. And that's again it became a limitation in terms of its adoption within the research, the agricultural research sector. And in India it got introduced around 2002, and I would say by the time when this study was done, it's about 4 years back. So 3 million farmers were already reported informally to having done SRI and covering about 3 to 4 million hectares, which is a lot. And most of it is again, as Sabya was talking about, in the rain-fed regions of the country. And 2008 onwards, our institute, People Science Institute, was one of the pioneer in terms of applying it in the wheat, and subsequently it also got applied in other crops, and therefore the new term is it's not a system of crop intensification rather than a system of rice intensification. Some people prefer to call it a system of root intensification because it's based on healthy roots, and it's already recognized by FAO as a climate resilient technology. Next. So the PAN, apart from its potential, earlier there was a lot of hesitancy in terms of promoting SRI, and due to yield and loss apprehensions and the reasons that I told. Earlier, states like Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka were are the earlier states which took it up, and then it was followed up by states like Tripura, Bihar and Odisha and Jharkhand. In terms of approach, with Pan-India, and this is what I'm going to again come to next, is in some of the states it has been more CSO driven. In some states the government went ahead, and in other states it was a mix of it was more which came out of the interaction between the research institutes and the civil society organizations. But the experience so far has been the farmers, the practices based on the principles. There is a lot of diversity in terms of how it is adopted by the farmers in different agroecological regions, and that's because even a farmer, we are talking about Uttarakhand and Maharashtra, especially in the mountain ecosystems from where my work is based, we see that the same farmer would have plots laid out at different places, having different soil depths and textures and slopes, and because of that, and even the farming, the conditions of the same farmer would vary from one season to another, the socio-economic conditions, and therefore that leads to the adaptations. You cannot have the same set of practices over a period. Subsequently, during the 12th five-year plan, which is 2012-17, it was SRI was recognized, and then in 2017 we also find it in the NITI Aayog's policy paper. It's also was recommended as one of the practice for doubling farmers' income, and has been also included in a lot of livelihood promotion programs like the National Rural Livelihood Mission, the National Food Security Mission. There is another one known as Sansad Adarsh Gaon Yojana. So, there also it has been recommended. Now, this particular study, we try to, and as I said, this is an RRI network funded as a one component of a RRI network funded project, comprehensive pilot project, in which we took three states. We considered three states, that is Bihar, and which is the Middle Gangetic Plain, and Tripura as the eastern, representing the eastern Himalayan region, and Odisha as representing the eastern plateau hills. And this was done purposefully. So, I mean, all these three, they belong to the rain-fed region. There is a lot of variations in the agroclimatic. As we will see, there are also 3 or 4 physiographic regions within each of these states. And it also accommodated variation in terms of who took the lead in promoting the SRI. So, and what are the experience. So, therefore, we, intentionally picked up these 3 states, and also these were the states where in terms of area coverage it was much more. So, we wanted to, while we as PSI were promoting SRI more in Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, but we wanted to learn from other states that what has been the experience, what are the things which can help in promoting agroecological practice like SRI. So this involved a policy analysis, and we looked into both at the 3 levels, the macro, meso, and the micro levels, going through the policy documents, and within these 3 states, as I already has mentioned, about some of the programs through which it has been promoted. In Bihar particularly, what you see as RKVY is the Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana. It's still on. And in Bihar, Jivika program is more for livelihood development. BGREI is bringing green revolution to eastern India. So it's a follow-up of the green revolution that we have talked about. And it's also a controversial subject, whether the eastern India should go through that process and how. In Odisha, again, the same thing, and MAKSP is Mahila Kisan Shashakti program, so which focuses more on women farmers. So different states have tried to integrate SRI through different programs in their in the agricultural fields. In terms and the research tools that we applied. So other than the literature research, we looked into the different programs, the budget, the coverage, interviewing different government officials, and also talking directly to farmers, as well as there's a cadre of people who are, and they are known by different names. They are also known as village level resource persons or Krishi Sathis. So different names in different states. So they are kind of farmers from the same village, but they do a lot of hand-holding of their fellow farmers. And they are quite critical in terms of when we talk about introducing new practices, agroecological practices in the region. So these are the 3 different levels, and you can see that whom did we interact with at the state level. Here we are considering at the macro level, it's the state level of officials rather than the national level, because our study area was restricted to state. At the meso level, it's more the district and the block level officers, and at the micro level, talking to the, particularly in Tripura, it was even the Panchayati Raj institutions was heavily involved. So them, the village level resource persons who have talked about, and having focus group discussions with the farmers who had experience of adopting or adapting or even disadapting itself. I wouldn't like to go to the details because that will take a lot of time, but just to highlight, in terms of the, I just want to highlight the diversity within the 3 states. And so there is a mix of highland as well as lowland. There's also, particularly like a state like Bihar, it's also subjected to floods as well as drought. Then you can see that more number of farmers in the state, like about in Odisha it is 53%, but it goes to as high as more than 90% in Bihar and Tripura, the small and marginal farmers. Irrigated area, it's the least in Odisha, and it's 62%, which is maximum in Bihar. That too in North Bihar, I would say most of it is not in the southern Bihar. The main crops are also there, but what has been put here in bold are the crops where SRI has been applied. So it's basically rice, but in Bihar, they went further in applying the SRI principles and practices on crops like wheat and mustard. And in Odisha, Sabya did mention about Odisha Millet Mission, so where it is still being, one component of that is applying the SRI principles on millets, but besides that, pulses is also is one of the crops where it has been applied. Now, so in Tripura, it was more a government-led initiative, and where the State Agricultural Research Institute and the Department of Agriculture were in the lead. Particularly, I would like to mention here Bahrul Mazumdar, because in the morning, like Biju was mentioning, that you need key persons or anchor institutions. So and Bahrul was one of those. In each of the states, like it was in Bihar, it's Pradhan and later Pran who took the lead. In Odisha, it was more the Odisha Alliance, Learning Alliance. So it's a network, just like the Aadhaar network, which took the initiative. In fact, in Odisha, it was one of those who brought the macro, meso, and micro levels together. That has been quite effective. So, and then there are these different programs in different states. Again, I don't feel like going through all that given the time constraint. Next, please. So in Tripura, one of the things was that the panchayats had been involved a lot in terms of, especially for community mobilization purpose, and hybrid rice was also included. Otherwise, the experience with SRI is that with the local varieties, the percentage grain yields are much more. But because it was led by the government, so the focus there was much more on trying it out. I mean, you can see in the inputs, in the package that was done under NFSM, that there was high-yielding varieties which were given as inputs. And training was provisioned through something known as Atma. So different programs, and it is because of that mindset. I mean, someone like Bahrul Mazumdar could think of that what can be, how those resource commitments, which again Biju mentioned about, that from where which resource could be gathered, from which program, and therefore this happened. So, and you can see that as much as 30% of the total budget under NFSM was allocated for demonstration. Putting up demonstrations of SRI in the field. And as well as, it is also important, the farm mechanizations, appropriate farm mechanization. So therefore seeders, weeders and arrangements for that was also done in the state of Tripura. But what we see, so the area between like from 2006 to 2015, we see 2015 to 19, we see that the area coverage, the total area coverage under paddy, 35% of that was under SRI, but gradually that has reduced to about only 25%. And the reason behind here that is that here the subsidy, there was a provision of subsidy for 3 subsequent years, but over these 3 years the farmers, they experimented and they adapted the technology, and they changed. I mean, as there are 5 or 6 practices, them or do it in a different way. But at that moment, the government doesn't recognize it as SRI. So even I don't think it is as per their records, it has come down to 25%. But still, I mean, it might be even more than 50%. If a farmer does practice 2 out of the 5 principles or practices and get still higher in yields, I would still consider it as an SRI, but not what was recognized by the farmers. Similarly, in Bihar, Pradhan, as I mentioned earlier, took the lead, and one of the things that Pradhan did, especially under the Jivika, was having developing a whole cadre of trained village level resource persons, and particularly bringing the women on the forefront. And because one of the things that we have to recognize in most part of India, especially in the rainfed area, the male farmers are basically doing the land preparation, and the rest of the work is done by the women itself. And therefore, this was very helpful in increasing the coverage under SRI. But here also later on, with the coming of this Green Revolution, bringing Green Revolution to Eastern India program, then there was a whole shift from SRI to direct seeded rice, because it could be more easily done allocations and having institutional anchors in place. Thank you.
Long live India and France friendship.